Hey there everyone, so let's get right down to business. The reason that many builds are constructed in the manner that they are and the method in which they operate are going to be covered in greater detail with this guide. Due to the fact that a large number of players are avoiding certain builds more and more because they are clueless on how they function both for them and for the build itself, let's go ahead and see if we can't open up your mind to the choices based on yourself as a player. It is possible that many of you are aware that over the course of our timeline as Teemo players, we've gone through a multitude of build after build, but we've always consistently settled on the same three styles that are fundamental integral parts that provide Teemo with incredible advantages. The main three builds are Burn, On-Hit, and Burst. Now before you bring up the fact that there are additional builds such as Bruiser Teemo, Tank Teemo, and Mobility Teemo, you need to be aware of the fact that these builds are essentially combinations of the three that we already play altered to fit the specific needs because of runes and itemization. So let's talk about that in a more detailed and visually represented manner, starting with On-Hit. I feel like a numerous number of players, regardless of their rank, have a tendency to forget where Teemo came from. He was considered a marksman for a considerable amount of time, and despite the fact that he was a marksman, he never completely settled down with a playstyle that was more related to crit, only on a few special occasions. In this case being the long forgotten days of ZZ-Rot Portal and Banner of Command, where minions would literally be immune to your damage as magic, and a severe need for wave clear and AD was necessary. Now due to the fact that he was complemented with on-hit attack speed that both increases AP and his ability to stay nimble with a very evasive playstyle back in the day, when CC was at an all-time low, alongside mana being very hard to manage due to the lack of runes, a significant increase in Blade of the Rune King playstyles was observed by us back then, because it made sense for the old items and the constant HP bruiser tanks that we always had to face. Teemo scales with AP. He has absolutely no AD scaling. Now items like Kraken are available, so there really isn't much incentive to play Blade of the Rune King playstyles anymore, besides literally killing yourself with a reflex. Many players will tell you that Kraken is a bad item, the worst item that has ever been added to a Teemo build. Kraken is an item that needs you to hit people 3 times, then 3 more times for an increase of 50% and finally 100% bonus damage when you finally get that 6th auto attack off. What type of scaling does Teemo have? AP scaling. The question is, how much AP scaling does Kraken carry out? At the moment, an AP boost of 60% of your current AP and a 65 boost from AD as bonus AD on hit. You cannot deny that when you completely commit to an AP build, that figure becomes an impressive number in terms of a hybrid build, all while maintaining a high amount of AP that will scale into his Q, his R, and his E poison. If you've been following with this conversation so far, in the event that you strike a tower twice, the third effect will not activate. 2 attacks on a minion will cause it to cast the third effect as well. As a result, you have successfully activated 2 of the 6 effects. In the event that you are capable of hitting a tower twice or even a minion twice, and then the champion consistently, it will continue to treat the damage as the 6th empowered auto effect. Doesn't sound that complicated now, does it? This means that if you hit the target 3 more times, it will activate press the attack and also the 4th auto attack, which is the 6th auto. Additionally, there is a possibility that you will crit for more than 1,600 bonus AD with a 20% or 60% crit depending on what build you've chosen. While everyone was distracted last season with the Static Shiv build and the fact that it was gutted to the ground, Kraken Slayer did not see a single nerf. This offers a tremendous amount of hybrid possibility, especially if your target is stacking MR, while you have primarily been building AP with a Kraken added on. I have to say, there are a lot of people out there who just don't care to actually try these things, and they make up these random builds that don't really work together in unison with the items that are being used with it. So in this case, Nashor's Tooth is being scaled into Kraken Slayer, and Kraken Slayer is giving you a massive boost of hybrid damage. It is actually a very, very powerful spike damage when you play press the attack. These are the runes that we typically play with this type of playstyle, which is characterized by the extremely high mobility, high damage, and sustainability, as well as the overall playstyle that is incredibly aggressive and gets the heart racing. The downside, of course, is it's very expensive if you do try to go for a Rift Maker replacement. Let's move on to the Burn build, which is a name that everyone is familiar with. In fact, I would go as far as to say that this is the only build that anyone ever anticipates you to ever go, because it's the only build people think that you can play when they see a Teemo player. It just seems like most people stereotype him as a champion who can only play one build, yet he can literally play anything and make it work, because of his deep diversity. Though the last few seasons haven't really been too kind to his shroom builds, due to the bugs and the issues that are currently affecting him and the item Malignance, which has 0 cooldown and the ability to spawn multiple AoEs back to back, especially if champions flash out of the first one, making it very devastating when procced in a straight line on multiple champions on a choke point, alongside Shadow Flame and Storm Surge, which granted him a 58% win rate overnight and a hefty nerf and a massive flat magic penetration literally everywhere. This is becoming one of his most powerful builds. When it comes to burn playstyles, the general notion is that you want to close out the game as fast as possible with a lot of burn damage early game due to your E poke, your Q poke, and your shrooms. This is usually best done with Airy, however Airy does not really scale well into the late game if you end up getting into it. One of the most popular builds with this playstyle is Dark Harvest because it scales tremendously into the late game, doing upwards to 4,000 damage. This is because Dark Harvest is something that can be now activated on a single shroom, in contrast to previous seasons when Comet was a much stronger and more consistent rune for dealing damage because Dark Harvest could never activate on items alone. The argument tends to be that high-ranked players play Dark Harvest all the time, and that they should also play Dark Harvest in their games. The only problem with this is that higher-ranked players are way more confident in their ability to snowball and control their lane, specifically if it's a matchup that they are more in favored for. One major problem with this build is managing your mana, because it might be very challenging due to the severe lack of mana sustain that you have through your runes and through your one and only item that you're probably not going to take, that being Doran's Ring, if you do plan on playing a Dark Seal type of snowball effect. Most players play for a Q max, and I really do not recommend playing this type of playstyle with a Q max, because if you do play a Q max, you really need to understand mana sustainment. So if you were to play a rune like Comet, you have access to Mana Flow Bland, you have access to Doran's Ring, and you have access to Presence of Mind. If you use all of these together with constant E-pokes in between poking with Q, you will never run out of mana. However, if you put 5 points into your Q very early into the game, where Teemo has 334 mana upwards to 759 mana all by himself, and the fact that a Q max costs 90 mana each, you're never going to be able to manage your mana. So I know there will be a lot of questions regarding runes like Comet, and people saying that this rune is better, or even this item is better, or you're nothing but a troll. It's pointless to even have a conversation with these types of players who know next to nothing about the champion they're discussing, especially when it comes to what roles those champions are better suited for. Comet, while bad in the early game, is actually very consistent for shroom damage into the late game because it has a 4-second cooldown, whereas Airy is somewhat more effective into the early and mid, failing to scale into late game. While Dark Harvest is a very aggressive rune that does nothing for you if you can't get it stacked up. The same could be said for a lot of different playstyles, especially if you're in a rank that you consistently see yourself playing a 40 to 60 minute game, whereas the average high rank player consistently sees himself playing a 15 to 25 on average, rarely seeing those late game builds. So they build according to their environment, which does not transition well for long games, which you as a player may see. So I hope this makes sense to you. So there is a whole guide on how to effectively utilize your shrooms across the map, which I'm going to be working on in the next few days to keep it updated between work and to help you familiarize yourself with the new layout of the maps, the Baron Pits, and many of the other features. So with this playstyle, you're going to really want to cover the map up with shrooms. So I'm going to give you the very basic gist on how to do this effectively. While heading to lane, dragon, Baron, red, or blue, there's going to be a white line on the minimap that will tell you exactly what is going on if you clicked on the minimap or pinged that you're coming to that location. This is called autopathing, and this is the best way to guarantee that you hit more champions with your shrooms rather than throwing them around on the ground randomly, or even worse, placed together. Go ahead and try it in your next games. Look at where your pathing brings you. Every single corner, every single place that you think that somebody is going to turn the corner, place a shroom there and you will see more results. It's important to keep in mind that Dark Harvest is not the right rune for you if you are thinking of yourself as a very timid and passive player. Instead, I would recommend that you take up either Summon, Airy, or Comet, preferable for the passive aggressive playstyle that will still manage to transition into decent shroom damage, but nothing on the scale of how much damage you can do with Dark Harvest if you know what you're doing. You really want to be doing as much damage early on as possible, and so to do this, we'll be using Liandry's coupled with Shadow Flame, as it offers an absurd amount of magic crit, 20% increased damage if they fall below 35%, and 6% damage so long as you're fighting them for an extended period of time. To put this in perspective, once you get into the late game, you're going to have upwards to 48 flat magic penetration, and early in the game, around minute 15, you'll already have 30. This basically means you're almost doing true damage to every single champion you're hitting with shrooms. So with previous seasons, specifically with the mythic items, burst playstyles, shroom playstyles, and even on-hit playstyles were a lot different from each other because you had a lot of these items that did not work in tandem with both builds. A burst playstyle is quite similar to a shroom playstyle now in that it makes many uses of the same elements that are present in the build. However, a few of these items are substituted and used in a different manner in order to snowball out of control and stockpile Dark Harvest stacks for the mid to late game, which if needed can be switched back to a shroom build with very little effort or waste of resources, both with runes and with items. I can't really say that there will be much of a reason to actually showcase a lot or even talk too much about a Lichbane and Stormburst build. This is mostly because all you're doing is removing both Liandry's and Malignance and shifting your entire focus on activating your E with either Q, W, or your 5 stockpiled shrooms every 1.5 seconds. This will will allow you to get a huge burst of Lich Bane and as well as the activation of Storm Surge and Dark Harvest, which will allow you to stack and kill enemies very quickly, allowing you to snowball out of control so you can close the game much more faster. With regards to a burst build, I do get the impression that I truly need to bring this to everyone's attention. It seems like a lot of people choose to take a rune like Ultimate Hunter even if they're not playing a shroom build, despite the fact that there are certain problems with it if you do max out your ability haste. In this example, we show having a normal shroom build with 60 ability haste renders the rune Ultimate Hunter a 1 to 2 second cooldown, which is not very effective. There is a concept known as diminishing returns, which I am discussing in this example. Because of this, everything in the game is affected more or less depending on how much you have currently. Whereas if you had 0 ability haste, it would suddenly be a 6 to 7 second cooldown reduction. If you sat down to compare Ingenious Hunter, which affects every single cooldown item in the game from Zhonya's, Yomu, Blade of the Rune King, it doesn't really matter what it is. It has so much more of a large effect, upwards to 40 seconds off of that item. Which is why I personally think that if you play items like Storm Surge, Zhonya's, and many other cooldown items, you'd be better off with Ingenious Hunter. While if you build no ability haste, you'd be better off with Ultimate Hunter. Now, unlike On-Hit and other builds, if you get into the late game with a Lich Bane burst build, you're really not going to be able to do much unless you know what you're really doing and if you have a team that can actually back you up. So you're better off switching back to a shroom playstyle, and at this point you should really have yourself upwards to 45 or even 60 plus Dark Harvest stacks into a 50 to 60 minute game. No matter if you're playing bursts or even shroom playstyles, you have to comprehend this rune. Dark Harvest is a rune that will literally put you to the point where you're willing to sacrifice your life in order to get a single stack on time. Specifically, what I mean to say is that Dark Harvest is significantly more effective for you when you're able to keep 1 stack of every 2 minutes during the laning phase. This will allow you to eventually have more than 25 Dark Harvest stacks when you get out of lane and transition into the 30-minute marker. The reason behind this is because of the rune Electrocute. Electrocute does the exact same amount of damage as 25 Dark Harvest stacks at 30 minutes. So if you're never able to get that many Dark Harvest stacks, you'd be much more effective just simply playing Electrocute. In the event that you do find yourself falling behind by 5 to 10 minutes in stacks, you ought to reevaluate the reasons behind this and determine whether or not it's even worthwhile to play such a risky and aggressive playstyle. Once again, I did mention that there are many alternative builds out there for Teemo, but I really don't want to touch base on many of them because there are so many builds designed for high rank, low rank, and mid rank, and so many of the factors that it's difficult to help you understand why I wouldn't recommend a Iron to play Fleetfoot into such a easy to snowball champion. While they make mistake after mistake, that can be severely punished with items like Dark Seal and runes like Dark Harvest. Whereas a high rank player would need all of that survivability and mobility with rune itemizations like Fleetfoot, Celerity, Swifties, W Max, Cosmic Drive, and Storm Surge to help them stay on their toes into champions like Aatrox or even Olaf, tanks, and certain bruisers who actually know how to play the game, unlike players in low rank, which is why these builds do not translate well rank-wise. Which is why I always tell people to look at themselves. Look at your own ranks. If you're a high rank player, use something that benefits that type of environment, and the same goes for low rank players. You wouldn't want to play a low rank build in high rank, and vice versa. You wouldn't rely on a high rank build in low ranks because it is a severe crutch if you don't exactly know what's going on with that build or itemization. They are complete polar opposites. Instead of being cowards and using Phase Rush and Grasp, which are both niche and obsolete these days, now that Fleetfoot is basically a combination of both of them into a much stronger and effective rune that will not lower your damage and allow you to still play the game rather than use the rune in a way to survive rather than relying on your own ability to play the game and survive on your own. Never learning how to actually play Teemo because all you're doing is hiding behind things and continuing to make yourself worse. There's just something that you're not doing as a Teemo player in the efficient and consistent manner if you're unable to climb when you are playing the game. At the end of the day, I love Teemo. He's been a significant part of my life for the last 10 years. Some may even call me the Teemo Guru, and I take great pleasure in assisting others in becoming better and properly comprehending Teemo. I don't care if you're Iron, Bronze, Silver, Challenger, everybody can learn new things about Teemo, even myself, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, if you're willing to open yourself up to it. Back in Season 4, there was literally nobody to look up to when it came to written content or even Teemo guides, so I took up the mantle so that I could be there for you, a player who is genuinely interested in learning and becoming better on Teemo. In light of this, I would like to express my gratitude to you for being a part of my life for the last 10 years, during which I have spent countless sleepless nights along with hundreds of thousands of hours in order to keep you updated on the great deal of fundamental information and builds pertaining to Teemo and all of the other projects that we as a community have been able to put together for anybody looking to become a Teemo main. There is nothing in this world more that makes me happier for people to reach out to Teemo players who are in need of understanding. If you ever come across one Teemo player in your game who is performing poorly, then you should really give them a nudge in this direction, and I would be thrilled to be a part of their adventures. I do plan on releasing some future videos in the coming days or weeks regarding some very useful tips and knowledge that may be frustrating you, like how the hell a certain champion or item or anything in general interacts with Teemo and how to be aware of it in the future.